The first time I met Derek Halden, he shook my hand like he was testing how breakable I was. I'm Caldren Voss, contracts lead at a logistics tech firm called Northbarrow Systems. I wasn't a star, I wasn't a VP. I was the guy who kept deals from turning into lawsuits. That week, we were closing the biggest contract in our division's history. A 3-year services agreement with Harrowell Retail Group worth $12 million. Implementation, compliance reporting, cold chain monitoring, the whole thing. It wasn't nice to have money. It was budget saving, headcount saving money. The kind of deal executives brag about on stage and quietly blame someone for if it dies. The final signer was Leora Kensett, Harrowell's procurement VP. She had a reputation for one thing. She didn't get dazzled. She tested your stability the way pilots test an engine, by pushing it under stress. Derek was our executive sponsor, loud, polished, and allergic to accountability. He called my work slow because it forced him to stay honest. I had spent weeks with Harrowell's legal team. Real negotiation, real concessions, real reasons. Audit rights, service levels, data retention, escalation paths. Everything was aligned. That morning, our internal counsel had signed off. Sales was already celebrating like it was done. The boardroom smelled like coffee and printer paper. The Harrowell team sat to my right, calm and prepared. Our sales lead sat to my left, trying not to fidget. The signature copies were stacked neatly, pens laid out like we were hosting a wedding. Derek walked in late and didn't apologize. He tossed his phone on the table, sat down, and scanned the room like he was bored by everyone's existence. "Are we still doing this?" he said, not quietly. I ignored the bait and started the closing recap, not long, not theatrical, just the facts. Scope, timeline, support hours, service credits, compliance reporting. Leora listened without expression. Her counsel followed along, no interruptions. That's how I knew we were in the safe zone. Then Derek leaned forward, pointed at my packet, and smiled like he was about to do me a favor. "Why is he running this?" Derek said. "He drags everything. We could have signed this last week if he didn't need a handbook for breathing." The room went still. Sales didn't move. Nobody laughed. I kept my voice level. "We could have signed last week if we wanted to accept their previous audit clause. We didn't." Derek's smile tightened. "So now you're educating me." "I'm explaining the risk," I said. Leora's eyes flicked up for half a second, then back down. Not shocked, just noting. Derek slid my packet toward himself, flipped through my red lines like they offended him, and tossed it back. The stack clipped my water glass. A little spilled onto my collar. I wiped it slowly, not because I was calm, but because I needed to look calm. That's the part people don't understand about corporate humiliation. It's rarely about what happens. It's about what you do in response, because someone's always deciding whether you're safe to trust under pressure. Leora's counsel spoke, polite but firm. "We're comfortable with the current language," Derek laughed. "Of course you are. More process, more paperwork, more billable hours for somebody." That's when I felt the deal shift, like a plane hitting turbulence. Nothing had gone wrong yet, but you could sense the air thinning. Derek stood up halfway, not fully, just enough to loom, and leaned toward me across the table. "Don't embarrass me," he said under his breath. I didn't respond. I didn't look up fast. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a flinch. He leaned closer anyway. And then he did it. A quick, deliberate spit. Small but unmistakable, right across my cheek in the corner of my mouth. For a second I couldn't process it because it was too absurd for a boardroom, too primitive, too personal. Then the silence hit. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Derek froze for a heartbeat, like he'd crossed a line and realized it mid-step. Behind him, 3 feet away, I saw Leora Kensett. She wasn't staring at me. She was staring at him. Not like a witness in a scandal, like a buyer realizing the product is defective. Derek recovered first. He straightened, turned to the table, and said brightly, Anyway, let's sign. That's when my body wanted to do the worst possible thing. React. The part of me that grew up believing respect mattered wanted to stand up and end his career with my fists. But another part, older, colder, trained by corporate reality, knew something better. If I exploded, I'd become the story, and Derek would survive by telling it first. So I did the only thing that kept my power. I reached into my bag, pulled out my notebook, the one I used for timelines and action items, and I wrote down the time to the minute. Then I wrote one sentence, simple and factual. Executive sponsor spit on me during client signing meeting. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't threaten him. I didn't even speak. I just wrote it down because I knew what was coming next. The deal would wobble. Someone would blame me, and Derek would try to rewrite those 10 seconds into something that sounded like employee conflict instead of executive misconduct. Leora finally spoke, calm as ice. "Let's take a short break," she said. Not a request, a decision. Her team stood. Her counsel closed his folder. The CFO didn't look at Derek once. As they left, Leora paused by the door and glanced back at me. Just one look. And in that look, I understood the real danger. She hadn't decided to cancel the deal yet, but she had decided to test what we did next. Because in corporate life, character isn't what you say in the room. It's what your company protects after the room empties. And Derek had just made sure the next 10 minutes would decide everything. 10 minutes in a boardroom isn't a break. It's where the real negotiation starts, just without the paperwork. Leora and her team stepped out to a smaller conference room down the hall. Their counsel kept his folder tucked under his arm like a shield. The CFO's face was blank, but his jaw was tight. No one said a word to Derek on the way out. The door closed, and the air changed. Derek didn't explode right away. He did something worse. He smiled. Slow, like he was about to teach me a lesson. "You really want to do this?" he said softly. I kept my hands on the table so they wouldn't shake. I didn't wipe my face again. I'd already cleaned it once at the sink. Any more and it starts looking like a performance. "What do you mean?" I asked. He leaned in, voice low. "You know exactly what I mean. You sit there with your little notes and your little rules, and you make me look like the villain." "I didn't say anything," I replied. "That's the problem," he snapped. "You're playing that quiet martyr thing. You want them to feel sorry for you." That's when I realized he wasn't scared of what he did. He was scared of how it looked, and how it looked was about to cost him money. My phone buzzed once, a reminder I'd set days ago, back when this was just a normal closing meeting. Meeting capture enabled. Archive set to auto-save. Northbarrow used an approved recording system for certain client sessions, mostly for minute-taking and compliance. Harrowell had signed the consent form that morning. The small red indicator light sat in the corner of the boardroom ceiling, steady. Derek either didn't see it or assumed nobody would ever use it against him. He stood up and walked behind my chair like he owned the space. "If this deal slips," he said, "I will bury you. I'll tell them you were unprofessional. I'll tell HR you provoked me. And you know what? They'll believe me." I didn't answer fast. I watched him in the glass reflection of the wall screen, watched him choose his words like a man practicing future lies. Then I said one sentence, quiet. "Threats don't fix a contract." That was it. No accusation, no emotion, just a boundary. His face tightened. "You think you're smarter than me, Caldren?" "I think this room has cameras," I said. He froze. Then he laughed like it was a joke. "Oh, you're gonna report me. Is that what this is? You want to play hero?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just opened my notebook again, flipped to the line where I'd written the time, and added another. "Threatened retaliation if deal slips." Derek saw the pen move, and something in him snapped. He reached out like he was going to grab the notebook. I pulled it back, not dramatic, just fast enough to make the point. It wasn't his. His eyes went wild for half a second. Then he forced a grin again. "Put it away," he said. "You're not going to do anything." Before I could respond, the boardroom door opened. Not Leora. Not sales. A woman in a charcoal blazer stepped in like she belonged there. Marlo Sign, internal legal liaison. She wasn't part of the scheduled meeting, which meant someone called her. Her eyes went straight to my face, then to my collar, then to Derek. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need the story. She needed the shape of the risk. Then she glanced up at the red recording light. A tiny pause, like she was calculating exactly how much damage was already preserved. Derek's voice sharpened. Marlo, why are you here? Marlo answered with corporate calm. Because Harrowell requested legal presence for the remainder of the session. He scoffed. They requested you? They requested assurance, she said, still polite. I'm here to ensure the remainder of this interaction is properly documented. Derek's jaw worked like he was chewing anger. Marlo stepped closer to me, not protectively, not dramatically, just close enough that Derek would have to speak through her if he wanted to reach me. She spoke quietly, but every word felt like it had weight. Caldren, she said, do not discuss the incident directly without counsel present. Keep your notes. If anyone asks what happened, you say you're providing a factual timeline through legal. Derek lifted his hands in fake innocence. Incident? What incident? We're just having a normal negotiation. Marlo turned her head slightly, eyes on him now. Then you have nothing to worry about. That line landed like a blade, because it meant, if it's normal, it's recorded. If it's recorded, it's provable. My sales lead, Aster 9, peeked through the doorway behind Marlo like a kid checking if a fight ended. Her face was pale. What's going on? She whispered. Marlo didn't answer. She simply said, everyone stays professional. The client will return. Derek took a step back and tried to reclaim control with volume. This is ridiculous, he said. We're here to close business, not babysit feelings. Marlo's expression didn't change. This is not about feelings. This is about exposure. His eyes flashed. Exposure to what? You're acting like someone committed a crime. Marlo's voice stayed even. I'm acting like we're in a recorded client meeting where reputational harm is measurable in dollars. Then she looked at me again, just briefly. A silent instruction, hold steady. That's what I did. I didn't give Derek a fight to point at. I didn't give HR a messy scene to both sides later. I just sat there with my notebook closed and my breathing controlled, and my face still burning, not from spit anymore, but from the reality of what it meant. He'd crossed a line in front of the client, and now he was trapped in the only thing he couldn't bully, a timeline. The door opened again, footsteps. Leora's team was coming back, and Derek, for the first time since I'd met him, looked like a man who suddenly understood he might not get to decide how this story ends, because he wasn't the only witness anymore. The client was. Leora didn't sit when she came back. She stood at the head of the table with her folder tucked under one arm, like she was holding a boundary, not paperwork. Her counsel stayed half a step behind her. The CFO hovered near the door, eyes scanning the room the way you scan a restaurant kitchen when something smells off. Derek forced a grin that looked painful. Leora, he said, voice warm and rehearsed. Let's wrap this up. We're aligned. Minor tension, that's all. Leora didn't smile back. She looked past him, straight at me. Caldren, she said calm, are you able to continue professionally? The words were polite. The meaning wasn't. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She was asking if I was safe, if the company was stable, if this meeting was going to be about signatures or about damage control. I felt every instinct in my body scream for vindication, for the truth to burst out loud so nobody could pretend they didn't see it. But that's not how corporate reality works. If you speak emotionally, they classify it as conflict. If you speak factually, they classify it as risk. So I answered the only way that protected me and told the truth at the same time. I can continue, I said, and I'll provide a factual timeline through counsel, if requested. Marlo's eyes flicked to me, one tiny nod, Derek's smile twitched. Leora turned to Marlowe. We requested legal because we don't sign under uncertainty, Marlowe replied smoothly. Understood. The meeting is being captured per your consent. We can provide the archive and a preservation notice if needed. The word preservation made the sales lead inhale sharply. Derek laughed too loud. Let's not be dramatic. Nothing happened that should derail $12 million. Leora's counsel answered before she did. $12 million is exactly why this matters. Silence. You could hear the building's air system humming. Leora finally stepped forward and placed her folder on the table, not opening it. Derek, she said, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I need a simple answer. He nodded like a man granting permission. Did you put bodily fluid on your employee during this meeting? Derek's face hardened. Excuse me? Leora didn't blink. That was not a metaphor. My stomach dropped. Not because she asked like she already knew the answer, like she'd seen this before in other companies, and she knew the exact shape of it. Derek's voice turned sharp. This is absurd. Leora's counsel opened his folder. We observe behavior that would meet the threshold for workplace harassment in many jurisdictions. Derek's jaw worked. So you're going to threaten us now? No, Leora said, still calm. I'm going to protect my company. She turned slightly, addressing her team. I need to know two things before we sign anything, she continued. 1. Does Northbarrow have effective governance and an ethics process that actually functions? 2. If something inappropriate happens in your boardroom, do you correct it or do you cover it? Derek leaned forward, trying to muscle the moment back. We correct everything, he said, but this is being blown out of proportion. Caldren is sensitive. The word hit me like a slap because it was exactly the label he wanted attached to me. Sensitive means unreliable. Sensitive means problem employee. Sensitive means you can remove him and the issue disappears. Marlowe stepped in, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. She just reframed reality. Leora, she said, we can confirm that any allegation raised during a recorded client session triggers an internal protocol. We will preserve the archive and follow our reporting process. Derek snapped. Allegation? You're acting like this is real. Leora stared at him for a long beat, then looked at me again, her voice softened by a millimeter, just enough to make it more dangerous. Caldren, I'm asking again, and I need you to answer in a way that is accurate. My throat tightened. This was the knife edge. Speak too little and you look evasive. Speak too much and you look emotional. So I did what I do for a living. I answered with structure. At approximately 11:27, I said, there was physical degradation directed at me during this session. I documented the time in my notes. The meeting capture is active. I can provide details through legal. No adjectives, no speech about dignity, no anger. Just time, category, and process. Derek's eyes went wide for half a second. Because he heard it, I'd just said it without sounding like a victim. I'd said it like a professional reporting a breach. Leora's counsel closed his folder with a quiet snap. That's sufficient, he said. Leora nodded once. Then she turned to Derek. I'm pausing this contract, she said. Derek slammed his palm on the table. You can't do that. We've spent weeks on this. Leora didn't flinch. We spent weeks on paperwork, she replied. Today we learned about culture. Culture is operational risk. She picked up her folder. We will not sign under an executive sponsor who displays contempt for his own people in front of us. Derek's voice rose. So you're punishing the company because one employee is making a scene? Leora looked at him like he was proving her point. No, she said. I'm declining to invest in a system that rewards that. She turned toward the door, then paused and glanced back at me one last time. If your company is serious, she said, we'll consider reopening in 1 week, but we will require evidence of accountability, not promises. Then they walked out. No yelling, no theatrics. Just the quiet of money leaving the room, When the door shut, Derek stood there breathing hard like he'd been hit. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Derek slowly turned toward me, and the rage in his eyes was pure and personal. "You did this," he said. I didn't answer right away, because I finally understood what had really happened. The deal didn't collapse because he spit. It collapsed because he showed the client what kind of company we were when pressure hit. And now Derek would do what people like him always do next. He'd try to make the truth look like my fault. My phone buzzed again, a message from Ops. "Meeting archive auto-saved, available by ID." I stared at the screen for a beat and felt something in me shift from humiliation to clarity. I wasn't in danger because Derek was powerful. I was in danger because Derek was about to rewrite the story. And if I didn't move first, quietly, properly, and fast, I'd be the one who got erased. That afternoon, Derek moved before the client's elevator doors even closed. He sent an email to leadership with a subject line that looked harmless. "Harrowell signing, status update." In it, he wrote that the client paused due to contract friction and internal communication issues. He implied my process created uncertainty. He used phrases like overly cautious, slow-moving, not aligned with executive direction. Classic, make the facts blurry, then make the target look unstable. I didn't reply to the thread. I forwarded it to Marlowe with one sentence. "I can provide a factual timeline. Meeting capture exists. Please preserve." Then I did the most boring, lethal thing you can do in a corporate crisis. I filed an internal incident report through the ethics channel. Not emotional, not dramatic. Category, date, time, location, witnesses. I listed names that were already in the room and could be verified. Asternheim from sales, Raiden Quill from ops. 2 Harrowell attendees by role, not by name, because we had their visitor badges logged. I attached my note page as a photo, no commentary, just the line with the time and the sentence. And then I stopped touching it, because when you overwork a report, it starts to look like a narrative. And narratives are easier to attack than timestamps. 2 hours later, HR sent me a calendar invite titled Wellness Check-In. That wording almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, because it was the first signal that Derek was already trying to frame this as a me problem. I walked into the HR room with Marlowe, because Marlowe had insisted. Inside were 2 people, Nessa Bram, HR business partner, and Jory Pell, our director of compliance. Derek wasn't there. He'd pushed it down the chain to see if he could get the story handled quietly. Nessa gave me the corporate smile that means, "I'm listening, but I've already been briefed." "Caldren," she said gently, "we're here to understand what happened and ensure everyone feels supported." I kept my voice even. "I'm here to provide a factual timeline." Jory nodded like that was the correct language. Nessa glanced at Marlowe, then back to me. "Derek described an escalation. He said the client felt uncomfortable." "The client felt uncomfortable because they witnessed misconduct," I replied. Nessa's pen paused. "Did you do anything to provoke it?" There it was, the trap. I looked at her and said, "If you need the sequence, the meeting archive provides it." Jory's eyes sharpened. "Archive?" Marlowe slid a printed confirmation across the table. Meeting ID, storage location, autosave status. Jory didn't smile. He just said, "We'll issue a legal hold." When those words are spoken by compliance, the game changes. Because now it's not an argument. It's a controlled process with audit trails. That evening, my manager called me, voice shaky. "Derek is saying you're trying to destroy the company," he whispered. I answered calmly, "I'm trying to stop the company from destroying me." Then I hung up and emailed him a summary in writing, because phone calls don't have timestamps. The next day, Derek tried a different move. He cornered me by the printers on the 3rd floor where the hum of machines makes it feel private. His smile was thin. "Congratulations," he said. "You got legal involved. You happy now?" I kept my hands visible. cameras in hallways. Always assumed cameras. I didn't get anyone involved, I said. The client witnessed the meeting. Derek's eyes narrowed. You think they care about you? I think they care about risk, I replied. His voice dropped. Withdraw your report. Tell HR it was a misunderstanding, or I'll make sure your next job is outside this industry. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with procedure. I can't withdraw it, I said. It's in compliance's system. They control it. A flicker of panic crossed his face, just for a second, because he understood what that meant. He couldn't intimidate the process the way he intimidated people. He stepped closer, like volume would restore his power. You're nothing without this company, he hissed. And I said the one sentence that ended the hallway conversation. I'm not the one on recording. He froze, not because I threatened him, because I reminded him the truth already existed. He walked away fast, shoulders tight. That same afternoon, Harrowell's counsel sent an email directly to Marlowe and our compliance director. They requested written confirmation that the meeting archive was preserved, unaltered, and retained under legal hold. A client doesn't request that unless they're building a file. Leadership panicked. Sales leadership panicked harder. And suddenly Derek's name wasn't being spoken with confidence anymore. It was being spoken with caution. By Friday, we had an emergency governance meeting with the executive committee. I wasn't invited, but Marlowe called me afterward and said, They listened to the recording. I asked, All of it? She paused. Enough. On Monday morning, the company sent a short, internal announcement. Derek Halden will be stepping away from client-facing responsibilities, pending review. Pending review. Corporate purgatory. But the real consequence came an hour later when Harrowell sent their final message. They were terminating negotiations, effective immediately. 12 million gone. And Derek, cornered by the loss, made his last desperate move. He scheduled a leadership call and blamed me. He said I was emotionally unstable. He said I created a hostile dynamic. He said I misrepresented what happened. Marlowe didn't argue. She played a clip from the archive. Not a dramatic montage. Not the whole meeting. Just Derek's voice, clear as glass. If this deal slips, I will bury you. I'll tell HR you provoked me. Then a short silence. Then the sound. Small, wet, unmistakable. After that, nobody spoke for a long time. Because a timeline doesn't need persuasion. It just needs playback. In corporate disasters, nobody confesses first. They negotiate the story. That's why you don't win by yelling. You win by timestamps, logs, and written notice. If your name is anywhere near the blast radius, build your timeline before they build theirs. Derek didn't get fired the same day. Real life doesn't hand you clean endings on schedule. But once evidence exists, the ending is just paperwork moving through the right hands. For the next 2 weeks, Northbarrow went into that strange corporate silence where everyone is polite, nobody jokes, and meetings suddenly include compliance on the invite list. I kept my head down and did my job, not because I was scared, because I understood the last trap. If I acted like I was at war, they could label me the problem again. So I acted like I was stable. HR interviewed me twice, both times with Marlowe present. They asked the standard questions. I answered the same way each time. Dates, times, facts, witnesses, process. Compliance pulled building access logs. Ops confirmed the meeting archive chain of custody. Sales confirmed the contract status and Derek's involvement. Even IT confirmed there were no edits to the recording file. Derek tried to rally allies, but nobody wanted to stand next to a man when the ground under him was made of audio evidence. 3 weeks after the incident, Marlowe called me into a small conference room on the legal floor. She didn't waste words. She slid a single sheet across the table. No letterhead, no drama, just a summary. Findings: misconduct in a client environment, harassment and degradation of an employee. Retaliation threat captured on recording material reputational. Damage to the company. Violation of executive conduct policy. The final line read, termination recommended. Subject to executive committee approval. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. Slow. Like my lungs finally remembered they had space. What happens to the deal? I asked. Marlowe's expression stayed neutral. The deal as it was is dead. Harrowell won't sign that version now. Too much trust lost. A part of me wanted to rage at that. 12 million, gone. Careers built on that number. But then she added, however, Leora agreed to a follow-up call, not with Derek, with a different sponsor, and with you present. 2 days later, we were in a new meeting room. Different boardroom, different seating, different energy. No fancy pens laid out like a celebration, just laptops and water. Our interim executive sponsor was Vance Orlan, a quiet operator with a reputation for cleaning messes without making speeches. Sales looked like they hadn't slept. Leora joined by video. She didn't start with anger. She started with a question that felt like a test. Is the meeting archive preserved under legal hold? She asked. Marlowe answered, yes. Unaltered. Chain of custody documented. Leora nodded once. Then she looked at Vance. Has there been accountability? She asked. Vance didn't promise. He didn't do PR. He said, yes. The sponsor who caused the incident is no longer in client-facing leadership. The review is concluding. Leora's eyes didn't soften. That's not accountability. That's containment. Silence. Then I spoke, not to defend the company, but to tell the truth in the only way that mattered to a buyer like her. I won't make excuses, I said. What happened was unacceptable. If I were in your position, I would have paused too. Leora watched me for a long moment. Then she said, so why are we here? I answered with the same structure that saved me before. Because our contract work was solid, I said. Your legal team agreed to the language. The risk wasn't the deliverable. The risk was leadership behavior under pressure. If you want to reassess, I'm willing to rebuild trust with a controlled pilot and measurable gates. Sales shot me a look like I'd just spoken forbidden language. But Leora didn't react like a politician. She reacted like an operator. A pilot, she repeated. Limited scope, short duration, strong exit clause. Yes, I said, and full audit transparency. Her counsel leaned in off-screen, whispered something to her. She nodded. Then Leora said the sentence that felt like oxygen returning to the building. I'm willing to reopen on a pilot basis. Not 12 million, not yet, but a path back to it, one that didn't reward Derek's behavior. After the call, Vance pulled me aside. You did that the right way, he said. No hero act. No mess. Just facts. A week later, the executive committee finalized the decision. Derek didn't get a dramatic escort out of the building, no scandal email, no public shaming. He got what men like him fear more than punishment. A quiet removal, documented reasons, and no narrative control. His exit note was 2 lines long. Derek Halden is no longer with Northbarrow Systems. We wish him the best. Nobody wished him anything out loud. 2 months later, Harrowell expanded the pilot, then expanded it again. By the end of the year, the total value wasn't 12 million, but it was big enough to matter and clean enough to be proud of. And the strangest part, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, because the real satisfaction wasn't watching Derek fall. It was realizing I didn't have to beg for dignity. I could enforce it with procedure, with documentation, with the boring steps that bullies can't fight. That's the lesson I keep, and it's the only revenge I trust now. When someone humiliates you, don't become the explosion they can blame. Become the timeline they can't erase. And if you ever find yourself in a room where power tries to rewrite reality, write first, preserve first, escalate clean. Because in the end, the person who controls the record controls the outcome.